we went like 30 minutes before I realized we never introduced ourselves. Welcome to Reformgelical, where the Reformed and Evangelicals meet. I am joined by OAD. OAD, how you doing today?
I'm doing okay. How are you?
I'm doing great. You are traveling on the road, so thank you for making this work. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. No, that's I look forward to these every day, so I'll do it on the road. Why not?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, it's a really good time. You know, I had an interview from another podcast this week, and it's funny, when I started this whole thing, I thought doing interviews on other people's podcasts would be really awkward, but it's actually kind of nice not having to be responsible for driving the show.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, it's way better.
It's way better.
Not better. It's way easier, I'll say.
Yeah.
But the thing is, but you always have to. The thing that's not so good about it is that you always have to be prepared for the surprise pushback or the surprise difficult question. Most of the time you get asked pretty easy questions, things that you talk about a lot, but every now and then you'll get one that you have to
get the curveball.
Think on your feet. Yeah, you got it. Yeah, so but that's what makes it fun, though.
Yeah, and I really came to peace with myself that if that ever happens to me, I'm just going to say I don't know. Like, I'm okay with not being the one who knows everything, and that really just takes the pressure off. Not that I did that, but that helps.
It does help.
Joe Biden, he pulled a Matt Chandler and picked a black 6 for a VP. Did you hear about this on the road? She's not good. She's definitely subpar.
Yeah, I think you're being a little generous with 6.
Yeah, but it really, I needed to get her to be a 6 for this to work, the transition.
Right. But I get what you're saying. And yes, that is very much the case. It's pretty amazing. Like the selection is so perfect for so many reasons. She's terrible.
She is absolutely terrible.
She's the worst. If you look just based on who they are and what they've done and the things that they maybe they've even said about you, she's like the worst possible choice, but he had to do it.
He had to. I don't know what else he was going to do.
I bet you he reached out to Michelle Obama probably, but she's too smart to team up with him at this point. Like, she knows what he's about.
Oh yeah.
So she would never do that.
Yeah. Which I'm really thankful for, because I am really scared of Michelle Obama. I think people love her, and would be more than happy for her to be president.
Oh, totally. I think she would win, probably hands down. However, you never know. You never know.
I know, seriously. That's something 2020 has taught us. You just never know what's going on.
But yeah, no, it's perfect. She's just the worst in almost every way. Like, there's so many weird things about her. Just even her track record is terrible. Her personal morality is horrible. Like, it's. I was talking to my wife in the car on the way to my mom's house, and it's like, this is the reverse of Trump last time, because the big criticisms from evangelicals, well, he's been accused of sexual assault, and he had that what's it, the hot mic where he
the video
was saying
on the bus.
Yeah, right, the audio of that or whatever. But Biden's like the same way. Like, he's got tons of credible accusations, and he's on video sniffing young girls' hair, underage girls even. It's just so creepy. And it's he's like the opposite world. And then but he cheated on his wife. Well, Kamala Harris has done that. Like, it's like the opposite. So it's like, and people would say, oh, Trump's crazy. He's not well. I heard a lot of people say he was mentally sick or something.
They were going to impeach him on that. They were trying to impeach him on that before the whole Russian thing took off.
I have someone that was very close to me that's kind of stabbed me in the back since then. But he used to always say, it's so serious though. Have you seen it? He's mentally ill. And I'm like, I didn't know what the heck he was talking about. But now Biden is clearly mentally unstable. Like, he doesn't even know where he is half the time. It's on video. Right. Like with Trump, it's just like, well, I just think he is. But with Biden, he's like, he talks nonsense. He thinks he's still in 1967.
Yeah.
So I'm not making fun of the guy. Look, everyone's brains go haywire at some point. But it's like, he can't be president though. But it's like, so the thing is, like, so now it's reversed. So now all the criticisms that we couldn't vote for Trump for, the evangelicals are. I mean, do you think that they're going to even dare say the same thing about the Dems? Obviously not. So God set this up perfect. I mean, he's put a mirror image of Trump except everything terrible. There's no redeeming qualities. This is like, you know what I mean?
Someone in the chat said they just had to explain the Biden Matt Chandler joke to their wife.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah. Well, and then I don't remember hearing this myself, but somebody was saying that that Kamala Harris was one of the women who said, "Well, listen, I believe his accusers. I believe the women." And so now, but now she's teaming up with him. So it's either like she didn't really believe him, which I'm sure that's probably the case, and she was just saying it for show, or she does believe him, but she's like, yeah, but I can still work with him.
Yeah, opportunist for sure. And you remember she was also the one who was like, I was that little girl on the bus when he was working with the segregationists and things like that. And that was one of her big moments where she actually had some poll numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just love God on this so much. Like, seriously, 2020, all of the chaos, all of the destruction, and you really just go down a few layers and you see what God's doing. It's absolutely amazing. The Democrats going to Democrat, the progressives are going to progressive. They're going to do their thing. But I'm just really curious if we're going to hear any Christian leaders come out and still have this kind of, well, you got to vote your conscience either or, because everything they've said about Trump is now Biden and Kamala.
Yeah. Except way worse. And way more obvious. Like people always say, well, this is another example. It's the same thing. It's just so perfect. Trump is so corrupt. He's been coordinating with foreign assets and things like. And it's like it's all speculation. There's no evidence for it at all. But then on the other side, it's like, yeah, but it's clear that he's done this. Like Biden's done the exact same thing, and we have documents about it. So it's perfect, because not to say that you shouldn't vote for Biden for these reasons. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying though is that the evangelicals who made this case are now stuck either reversing the case or eating crow and saying, hey, these guys are the same.
Yeah. Which I
think that's the route they'll go. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no.
Sorry. What I think they'll do is they'll soft, hey, you probably shouldn't vote for Biden because of these reasons, but they'll do everything in their power to get you not to vote at all or to not vote for one of the two. Mm-hmm. Because if evangelicals don't go for Trump, it doesn't matter who they go for. He's not getting elected. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I don't see that. Like, I totally agree with you. I see the big Eva people doing that. And honestly, I'm more comfortable with them doing that than saying, oh, you could vote either way. I'd rather have them say, don't vote for either.
Totally.
I'm cool.
I totally agree. I'd rather that too. But I think that's what they'll go with. And that's the strategy of trying to get him not elected.
Yeah. Which, I mean, they're kind of going to go back underground and be secret closet Democrats. But
definitely.
I'm more comfortable with that and rather have them do that. So do you think they have a chance to win now that we know the ticket?
No. I think they sealed their fate at this point.
Yeah, I think so too. And I don't know, I see like Kanye still having like a platform listing out things. So is he in? I thought he was out. Have you heard anything about that?
I heard he was in, and then I heard he was out like basically a week later. Mm-hmm. And then I didn't hear anything until yesterday. So I don't know. Yeah,
interesting. 2020 never disappoints. I remember when the coronavirus thing was a few weeks in, and we were starting to think like, oh my gosh, is this all we're going to ever talk about for the rest of the year? And 2020 hasn't let us down. There's been plenty of content.
Yeah, there sure has. But let me stick with this thing because about the election here, because I agree. I'm definitely more comfortable with it, but it's almost more slimy if they go that route. They kind of go, well, you can't vote your conscience, but just make sure that you get someone who's totally Christian or totally, like it's more slimy because you know what they really want to do. You know what I mean? They really, you can see what they're up to, because they're gonna go from human flourishing to like, well, let's not divide over this. You know what I mean? They're going to write articles about not dividing over politics. So therefore, do something different. The third way. That's the famous thing. Christ's way is different. It's the third way. And that's true. It is the third way, but it's not the way that they're saying though.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, absolutely.
So it's almost more slimy because what they'd honestly, like, I don't know if the Kamala Harris pick has made it impossible for them to support Biden, but it made it as close as possible to being impossible for them to support it.
Yeah, it will be really interesting. I honestly don't know which way they're going to go. I mean, because they're so on the Marxist gravy train, the critical race theory stuff.
Sure.
Like with that, they're on the boat. They're not going to be able to get off. I don't think. I don't know. But at the same time, it's like, how do you come out and say in any kind of authority and still claim being a Christian that you're going to vote for Biden or Harris? Like all of the cons against Trump are nullified. It'll be interesting to say the least.
It's so true. They're all the cons have been nullified. So if you'll put up with someone supporting, Biden, which they definitely will, then you have to admit you can't be a never Trumper anymore.
No, you can't do it. The last thing I want to say about this, because a lot of other people have already talked about all this stuff. The cons of being a weekly show is all the daily shows can talk about the stuff as it breaks. But I was in Hawaii when the fake nuclear missile alarm went off, and everyone thought a missile was about to destroy the islands. And their cover story for that was that somebody turned on the coffee maker but they thought they were turning on the coffee maker, but then they switched the nuclear alarm code. Like they're right next to each other. The nuclear warning is right next to your coffee maker. It's really silly. But you think about Biden and his incompetence, and like being the big red button that everyone warned us about Trump. He's crazy. We can't trust him with the big red button. Like I actually really cannot trust Biden with the big red button. I could totally see him being unaware of where he's at, thinking he's in the kitchen making coffee, and he's in the situation room hitting this fictitious big red button that doesn't exist.
Well, yeah, I mean, and it's kind of funny to put it that way, but like again, that was one of the big things. I remember Thabiti Anyabwile said this. He said that he prefer, like he was trying to, at that point he was still fronting that he wasn't going to vote Democrat, right? So he said like, I don't know, I prefer evil that I understand as opposed to evil that I don't understand, and I just don't know what Trump's going to do. So like he was trying to make it seem like, well, I know Democrats are like not the greatest, but like at least I understand what they're going to do. I have no way to know what Trump is going to do. He's going to put me in a camp is basically what he was trying to imply. But the thing is, like, that's been nullified too. Because a man who doesn't know what year it is, who doesn't know what city he's in, doesn't know probably how to tie his own shoe, you don't know what he's going to do. And it's not because he's evil. Even if you said he wasn't evil, which he probably is. Yeah. Even if you said he wasn't evil, he's not mentally stable. Right. You know what I mean? No knocking it. I mean, we've all had family members that have gone through stuff like that. It's just is what it is. You see him. That's why he doesn't talk to the media anymore, pretty much.
I know. He's literally being hidden because no one knows what he's going to say or do.
Right. And so that's every knock has been taken off the table with the exception of, like border policies and stuff like that. But I think people have realized that you can't really win that debate anymore. Like, even amongst Christians, it's debatable. And plus, everyone already admits what Trump is going for is actually something that's legitimate for a government to do, is to protect their borders. Everyone, even the biggest hater like Russell Moore, would admit, well, you have to defend the border. Obviously you do. You know what I mean?
Does he even talk about that stuff anymore?
No,
like, I don't hear him talk about anything about book clubs and records.
It might come back eventually, but for now he's talking about, comic books and stuff like that.
Right before we came on, someone was saying, is the ERLC going to support the John MacArthur lawsuit? And are they? And I'm like, oh, they are? That's great news. Being sarcastic, because they're not. They're not going to do that. And like, that's their main role. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, like 2020 was their moment to shine. It was the time for them to prove what they're worth, like why we're paying these people, or not us. I mean, we're not in the SBC, but for that, is to justify their income, and they're just silent, absolutely silent. And they're not supporting John MacArthur at all.
It's so surreal, because I was about to. I'm glad that you said that, because I was going to interrupt you and say basically the same thing, because it's like this is the moment. Like this is your reason for existence. You're the Ethics and Religious Liberties Commission. Religious liberties, and so this should be what you're all about. This should be where when something happens, you should be like Batman showing up. You see the bat signal, and you're there instantly, and you're defending, freedom, right? That's what you should be doing. Right. And instead, like you couldn't even write this if you said, okay, what's the most ridiculous thing I could think of? You couldn't do this.
Yep.
Instead, what you get reading Rainbow episodes. That's what you're getting. And I don't, and the thing is, like, I'll give him a little credit. Not credit. I will defend him a little bit, because when it started, all of us were, this was like 150 days ago. And that was in the beginning when it was 15 days to flatten the curve, right? Do you remember?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. 15 days to flatten the curve. And so he launches his first few episodes of Reading Rainbow. And we all thought, like, we all had our gimmicks. I started doing a gimmick. I started saying, quarantine day 14 or something like that. And I quit after day like 20, because I was like, this is just going to go on forever. I can't do this anymore. But so I give him a little bit of defense, because he came up with something new. It was kind of cute. I'm in quarantine. We're reading in exile. It's just like we're in exile, but we're reading during it. but then when the first month passed, and it became so clear to everybody that this wasn't going to end at any time. This is going to be perpetual. You got to put a pin in it. You got to put a pin in it and get to some real work. And I'm sure he's working. I'm not saying he's not working, but it's just the optics of it are so perfect. Like, God has done a mighty work in 2020.
I don't know if you want to risk your credibility by saying he's working. I wouldn't say that.
Oh, Russell Moore.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have to assume that he is. I mean, how could he get away with just doing these reading?
Well, with that salary he gets, I mean, that's bold, man.
Are you telling me that he's only doing these Reading Rainbow episodes? That's all he does.
Well, I mean, he can't do much else. They only spend $35,000 on actual work or whatever it was.
Oh yeah, research, right? They only spend $30,000 on actual research, right?
But like $2 million on salaries or something stupid.
But what I was saying, God has done a mighty work, because the optics of this, like, you could think of most ridiculous scenario for the ERLC to be in. You could never have come up with something so ridiculous. The purpose of their existence, they're completely ignoring it for the most part. Mm-hmm. They'll write a stupid piece when the Supreme Court does thing pro-religious liberty, like, we support this. Like, oh, thanks a lot for doing nothing and for just saying you support the decision. I mean, I can do that in 2 seconds, and it takes no effort.
It's called a retweet.
It's called a retweet. Zero salary. Retweet. It's called a retweet. Matt, I can't even believe you said that. That's hilarious. Anyway, but yeah, so it's perfect. God has done a mighty work here. We all knew it was worthless, the ERLC. We all knew, but now it's just like so obvious. And so if you're still defending the ERLC at this point, you're being made to look like a fool.
Yeah, you get the clown emoji. If we're
did you see one of his cronies, that Brent Leatherwood? He said, I just got out of a meeting with the mayor of LA's people, so encouraged about us partnering together in the future. And then a few days later, they get the cease and desist. I retweeted that when I saw it. I retweeted that and I saw it. I said, guys, don't worry. Brent's on the case. He's on it. Because I don't have to be a prophet to know what's going to be the result of that. There will be no result.
No. Oh my gosh.
But you're so right. Like, God has set this up. The election is set up perfectly.
Yeah.
He's done so many things. I saw somebody say, maybe this was you, Matt, that I stole this from. I don't know. But God, in 2020, God has made it so perfectly crystal clear what people believe. And you can say you believe something all day long, but it's about how you act. It's about what you do. I always use the example when I'm teaching about what faith is all about, and it's just an analogy. But like, I can tell you, I have faith in airplanes. I believe that they'll get me to my destination. But if I never step foot on the airplane, you don't actually know if I have faith or not. You don't actually know if I believe it's going to take me there or not. The only way you know is when I get on and I say, yeah, I'm on this plane because I know it's going to get me to Florida. You know what I mean? Right. I'm not going to Florida, by the way.
You will someday. You're coming.
But that's the thing, man.
I know. And it gives me so much peace, and I hope it does for the people that are watching live right now and listening later, is with the setups that God is doing right now and telling a story, isn't it abundantly clear that he's in control? And that should just give us the most peace and reassurance ever. Like, if you look at the world and just forget about God being in control and moving the pieces and stuff, you're going to have so much anxiety. You're going to have so much stress. And it's going to lead to things like depression and suicide and drinking like we're seeing. But for us Christians, we can look at the actual higher level and know what God is doing, and seeing these plays being set up, seeing what he's doing in the midst of this stuff, and just rest and have hope and know that God is in control. He didn't like take his hands off the wheel. And that just gives me so much peace in all this time, where I can just have laughing and joking about all the foolishness, because God's good and in control.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So Brent Leather, I'm trying to find the tweet. He's the ERLC chief of staff. Here's what he said on the 7th. Just wrapped up the meeting with the mayor of LA's office about religious liberty and the state of church-city relations. It was a constructive dialogue. Church leaders and civic leaders should continue to partner together to serve their communities in the midst of this pandemic.
Oh my gosh.
And when did they get the cease and desist? Was it that day?
Yeah. So bad.
You can't write this stuff. It's just so perfect, you know.
It's so bad. And honestly, the only thing I've ever heard, he did 80 or not 80. Sorry, I don't mean to associate you with Russell Moore. The only thing I heard him say about it all was that it was just a misunderstanding, that these people weren't purposely doing that. Do you remember that? That was like 2 months ago. The governments were just having misunderstandings about what churches were doing. And here we are now, where we are having to have church services in defiance, that we're having lawsuits, that we're being threatened with jail time. Like Russell Moore, that was, as far as your vision went, that it was misunderstandings. Like, what are you doing? And why do we have you in that position?
It's yeah. So you're so right. It's just been so perfect, this whole situation. It's not. I mean, I wish like we weren't in this situation, but yeah, you know, it's. I'm glad that it's here, because I want to know what people believe. I want to know what people who profess Christianity actually do believe. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. That's helpful information to have for all of us.
Absolutely. Speaking of information, when we were talking about the flattening the curve, the 14 days, we were going to shut down for 14 days, and then we were going to get back to normality. Steve Dace, he's been doing a great job. If you guys are looking for facts and studies and analytics on the data itself, I would recommend you guys follow him. But he said, as of today, which is the day of this recording that he posted this, 150 days after the 15-day flatten the curve, 150 days, 3% of ER visits are from COVID symptoms. 1.9% of active cases are hospitalized. 0.014% of Americans are hospitalized with COVID. Only 0.7% of Americans are currently a positive case. And the median age of death from COVID is 78, which is the average life expectancy in the U.S. We've conducted 41 million more tests than the next closest free country. So did we flatten the curve? Like, how much more flat does this curve have to be? He's asking. And you just realize, guys, we're being conned. I mean, it's a play being run on us. There's no other explanation.
It's, you know, we talk about this often. Every time we talk about coronavirus, you know, we talk about the fact that in the beginning of this whole thing, a lot of us were skeptical, but we gave people a lot of, you know, benefit of the doubt. You know what I mean? Everyone was scared. Nobody had the info. People were reading all kinds of insanity on Drudge Report. You know, oh, you know, the dogs are spreading it. It's coming through your eyes. Your lungs are going to fall out if you get it. Like, we were hearing all kinds of stuff. So, you know, but now that, like, the more data that comes in, the more embarrassing it becomes. And what I've found is amazing is that the more data that comes in, the more we realize it's really not what we were sold. Mm-hmm. But simultaneously, the measures that are being taken are actually more extreme. Now you have to wear the mask. Now you have to wear the goggles. Now you have to do this, do that, whatever. Sure, yeah, we're allowing bars to open up at 10% capacity. That's a little bit less, but it's just so unbelievable. Like, churches are actually getting more strict now. And it's just so hard to understand. But you know, at this point, like, if you're being conned by this, like, it's on you now. You know what I mean? We all got conned. We all fell for it in the beginning. Mm-hmm. To some degree, but now it's on you. Like, you gotta have a little more sense of what's what. I mean, you don't have to be an epidemiologist to know that those statistics that you just read, it's not the Black Death,
right? Yeah,
you know, it's not the Black Death. Like, we don't need to cancel church for this.
Mm-hmm. And now they're like rushing 30 different vaccines coming at us, and
Yeah.
they're talking about mandating that, which is a whole nother level to me. And the credibility is just, they're ruined. It's the medical community and their credibility as a whole, not just on this, to me has been ruined because, like you said, the inverse is happening. The severity of this is getting less and less, and the measures are getting more and more. And I was talking with my wife about this the other day. It's like, how can we trust these very same people that are running these plays on us, pushing these vaccines, talking about this, how it's going to be 20 million deaths and all this stuff, are the same ones saying, hey, inject these 100 things into your kids or whatever, 10 things in your kids. And I'm not an anti-vaxxer, but I vaccinated my son, and Emily, or my daughter, she's coming up, and I'm just thinking, like, how can I trust them? Like, I seriously, as a steward of my children, how am I going to have confidence in the medical community?
That's I understand. And Matt, let me just say this, we have fun with conspiracy theories and stuff like that. Like I do have fun with conspiracy theories. I can read about aliens all day. I can read about flat earth conspiracies all day. It's fun. That's fun to me. You know what I mean? And if we didn't really go to the moon, it doesn't affect my life. That's funny to me. Like that's really interesting to me. What scares me to death is exactly what you just said, because at the end of the day, it doesn't scare me to death. But what gives me anxiety is this medical community. They don't appear to have people's best interests in mind at times. Sometimes I feel like they do, and sometimes I feel like they don't. And so it's like, this is what makes me upset, because the next pandemic that comes out, maybe it will be serious. But who's going to believe them? Why would you? Why would you at this point? And it's like, I'm sure these vaccines are great. The ones I give my kids. I'm not an anti-vaxxer either. I'm definitely going to be an anti-COVID vaxxer. There's no way I'm getting the COVID vaccine.
Yeah, there's no way.
Not a chance. But I'll tell you what, it makes me feel weird. Like, so why do I trust these guys again?
Right. And you think about, like, even your doctor, like, you could trust your doctor, but you realize that they have to follow the consensus opinion that they're being told, or they're opening themselves up to liability. So you're putting these doctors who most of them probably do mean well. Like, I'm not going to put any dishonesty into local doctors, but they're going to be faced with a choice. Do they go do the research, and then they say, oh no, I'm not comfortable with giving these vaccines and medicine that the whole medical community recommends. And then if something happens, I'm going to get sued and lose my living. Yeah. Or am I going to just go along with it and do what I'm told? Like, doctors, what do you think they're going to do? Weird position.
Good doctors are in a weird position. I have a doctor, well, when I used to live in Vermont, that I considered a good doctor. He was a very realistic guy. And, you could tell he was kind of like a fight the system kind of guy, but, he's playing ball.
Right.
So he kind of looked like a hippie too. I bet you he was a hippie. But anyway, so I go to the doctor, and, he does a blood work, and he pulls my blood. And he compares it to my old blood, and he says, hey, Adam, it's obviously you're very healthy. What are you eating? And I told him what I was eating, because I was doing ketogenic diet. And so he said, this is what he told me. He said, let me repeat. It's obvious your blood, it's very healthy, but you should consider maybe adding a few, grains and stuff like that, and maybe a Mediterranean diet. So basically what he was telling me, and I could see it, the way he was looking at me, I could tell what he's saying was, keep doing what you're doing. Right. But I have to tell you this. You know what I mean? It was one of those. And so he's in an impossible situation, because he has to do that. Right. He has to say, look, all the evidence is that you're fine, but I got to tell you to change your diet, because that's what I have to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And like, it doesn't give me any joy to bag on these people or to just put forward the skeptic perspective on it. But it's something we need to recognize as parents and realize the drivers that are going into these decisions that are impacting your children. Yeah. Especially when you're going to be faced with, are you going to get a vaccination for this disease or not? That's been rushed. That may be live versus dead. Like, there's a big difference between that and vaccinations. And where are they coming from? Who's making them? How fast are they making them? Are there going to be more mistakes? What are the controls? And what testing? What are the long-term effects? These are all questions that we, as stewards of the children God gave us, that we need to be thinking about, and not just going along with it because it's easy.
Yeah, I think you're so right. The hydroxycut thing, I think, has probably ruined me forever when it comes to pharmaceuticals and stuff like that, because because I'm not against pharmaceuticals, whatever. But the way that was handled, it was like the wrong guy promoted it, and so it became banned. And it didn't matter what the qualifications were of people who were saying, I would take it. I would give it to my father if he had COVID. I've seen it work many, many times. I know it's not for COVID, but I'm going to use it. I'm going to prescribe it to all my patients. It didn't matter who was saying that. That was banned. And if you said that, you were evil and you get demonetized, whatever it is. I mean, I call it hydroxycut as a joke, but if you say the actual word, you get demonetized, you get banned, you get blacklisted. And it's like that the way that was handled was so shady. And so I have to imagine that they know that's just how they handle things. That, you know what I mean? Like they move quick on that. They knew exactly what to do to shut that down. Why they wanted to shut that down, the motives are up to somebody else. But the thing is, that's how business is done in the medical community. They shut down any kind of opposition research. Right. That's how we end up with a food pyramid that's basically upside down the way it should be.
Yeah, I know. Oh my gosh. And if you go back and you look at the assault that got put on fat from foods and butters by the sugar industry, like it's not conspiracy theory. There's records of it now. It's gone back. And how the sugar industry influenced the medical community to blame the weight increase, the cholesterol and all that stuff on fats instead of sugars. Oh my gosh.
Right. That's how it's handled in this industry. And so now we know this. And so what do we do with that information? I don't have any clue what to do with that information. I do know it makes you super skeptical. And I don't want to be totally skeptical of everything, but you kind of have to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know what I do in some sense is I'm not just going to eagerly agree and be a yes man to anything my doctor recommends.
Definitely.
I am responsible for my kids and myself, my body, my family. I'm going to look to them as consultants, not as the authoritative figure and the end all in my life.
That's the key right there. I think, man, you hit the nail on the head. They're not your God. They're not your father. They're you hired them, and so you take their advice because their advice is valuable to you. But it doesn't mean that what they say is gospel. You know what I mean? It's not the Pope.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. So I want to go along with this. I don't know if you saw this. I posted this to you like 6 hours ago, and it's the "Are you kidding me?" link, where on Fox News, a doctor is floating the idea for kids to wear either a yellow shirt or a yellow button that says, "Don't hug me. I'm not vaccinated yet." And then he goes on to say, once you're vaccinated, you can throw it in the trash. But until then, that's what we should do. And for one, I just love it because this is totally vindicating us talking about the small battles of taking a stand against, like the mask, right? Where we've talked about this 1,000 times, where there's more than just the isolated battle. This is a whole war. Because now we're moving on to things that literally Nazi Germany did with the Jews, blaming them for the economic crisis that the Germans were going through. And they're going to do the same thing to our children. Instead of yellow stars that say Jude or Jewish, they're going to say, "I'm not vaccinated." And you're going to have to wear that. This is the idea on Fox News being floated, not MSNBC, not some radical left-wing newspaper like The Atlantic. Fox News doctor, the doctors we just talked about have ulterior motives. It's saying put the same colored badge on your kids if they don't have the vaccine, and they can only take it off until then, a shirt, a badge. And it's like the same color, the same thing. You're a threat to our society and you're going to be shunned. That's what they're saying. And it scares the crap out of me.
Yeah. Well, get your kids out of the schools, man. I mean, like there's no, you play by, you take Caesar's money, you play by his rules. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's so stupid. Like it's laughable on the face of it, but you're right. It is, the actual proposal here, it might be a little innocuous, but the idea that we could do this and we can get away with it is super terrifying. That
incredibly terrifying.
And wasn't it like 2 months ago where bullying was like the worst thing ever we had to avoid, and bullying was the cause of all of our problems? Like, what do you think's going to happen? What do you think's going to happen in school with the stupid yellow shirt kids? Because everyone and their mother is thinking that that's some kind of a weirdo freak thing. Like you must hate people, you must hate your grandmother or something like that if you don't want to get the vaccine. Like, what do you think's going to happen then? I don't understand. Like nothing is consistent here. It's because these people are pagans and they don't have to be consistent. In fact, they hate consistency because consistency is a sign of truth, and their language is lies. So it would be uncomfortable probably for them to be consistent.
Gosh, that's such a good point. Consistency requires standards that they must be held to. And the pagans do not want to be held to any standards because that implies a judgment, that implies accountability. And that's what they're fleeing by definition of being a pagan.
Right. And, but then it's so twisted because, you know, that's true. They want to flee all that stuff. But then when you do that, you end up creating all that stuff because you have to be totalitarian. You have to make up. So there has to be a law. So you make up this awful law that people have to follow. So it's almost like you want to be free. So you reject God, but then you make yourself a slave. That's how you become free.
Mm-hmm. Every single time.
Yeah, it always works that way. That's why every person who rejects the law of God and becomes an antinomian ends up becoming a Pharisee. They just create a new law.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So good. Oh my gosh. Our listener, Daniel Spratt, he got a call from someone from the government about vaccinations and his children. And he said he didn't call them back. Very smart move and a little creepy.
So let me tell you about this. I don't know if you heard this, Daniel, but on the way here, I was listening to NPR, which is basically just, you know, status propaganda, obviously. But there were these two ladies talking about contact tracing apps, which I guess there's an app that Google released or something. And I don't really know how it works because I wasn't paying too much attention, but it's what it sounded like was that you'd have it on your phone, and it sees where you are, like, you know, your GPS coordinates, and then basically, if you ever test positive for COVID, your name goes, you're like not your name, but your location goes into some kind of the cloud, I guess, and anyone that you're within 6 feet from will get a message from this app that said you've been exposed to COVID and you should get tested or whatever it is. You know what I mean? So it's basically based on proximity. And somehow this isn't a HIPAA violation. I don't know how, but somehow it isn't because I guess you don't name anybody. It's
because
just like
it's pagans and you don't need standards. That's
so.
Like
the reason why I thought of this, Daniel, is because you said you got a call from some government agency about vaccinations. So what'll happen in this is you'll get a call and they'll say, well, you might have COVID. And so today you were at, you know, Safeway getting groceries and you were exposed to COVID. We know this from the app. And they're going to, you know, follow you and make sure that you, I don't know, quarantine, I guess. I don't know what their goal is for this, but I could think of all kinds of ridiculous stuff. Like, could we get a vial of your blood? We need to test this and that. Like, imagine getting a call from the government saying, like, you have COVID. And you're like, what the heck are you talking about? I'm fine. I went to the grocery store today. Well, that's where you got it.
That's
you know what I mean? That couldn't be abused. No, definitely not. That would never be abused.
If a government called me and told me I had COVID, I'd be like, just call me back in a week and let's see if that's still true. Just like the Ohio governor, who he had it, and then a week later he took a test and turns out he didn't have it.
Nah, Matt, what you got to do? Let me teach you because I'm a Latinx. What you do when you get a call like that is you say, no, Matt, no here, no speak English.
Could you imagine if I did that?
Then they'd call you back in with a Spanish translator.
Oh my goodness, that'd be hilarious. All right. So will Big Eva preach sermons on reasons why to get vaccinated, the requirement to become a member? I wouldn't put it past them. I don't see how they could. I don't see how they could not. I don't see how 9 Marks could argue against that. Okay, the government's mandating you get vaccinated. I don't see any logical argument. Now, they might because they don't care about consistency a lot of the time, but they couldn't. I mean, there was some guy, I have a troll. I have a few trolls. I don't know if you knew that, Matt. I have some trolls. I think we all do.
There's one troll of mine that has I'm not going to name him because that's obviously what he wants, but he's got an air of respectability about him. People follow him. I guess he had like I guess he had a viral blog about something like very endearing about his kids. It went viral. And so people really like him now. And so he thinks he's the authority and everything. But anyway, I don't know anything about the story. Somebody told me that that's who he was. But anyway, So I put out a thing that said, if the government insisted that you eat a certain diet, you know, certain amount of this, certain amount of that, would Romans 13 apply? Right? or do they not have authority over your diet? And he said, obviously you do the diet. You give me a hard one. So someone like that who thinks like that, how could they argue against vaccines? Right. If they can control your diet, they can control what you stick in your arm.
Mm-hmm. And how can you argue against any vaccine? Honestly. Hey, Ted, good evening. Welcome. So we have a friend of a nurse. So it's a hearsay, but let's read this. It's interesting. She knows 2 of 20 deaths.
That's just as good as what you see on TV, man. It's all hearsay.
That's true. I should. Yeah. Why am I prefacing things? I'm just going to start saying it as truth. Not that I'm saying you're not telling the truth. I'm not saying you're lying. Friend is a nurse. She knows 2 of 20 deaths from COVID in our county were asymptomatic. One died of starvation from depression.
I've heard of
Heartbreaking. This. The mercy of the wicked is cruel.
Yeah.
If that is not the theme of 2020, I don't know what is.
Yeah. I've heard of this, man.
I think more have died from the reactions to COVID than COVID itself.
Yeah. I remember when I heard about the lockdowns, maybe like the next day or maybe that week. I don't remember which, but I said more people are going to die from these lockdowns than COVID. No question about it.
I remember you saying that.
I don't even hesitate saying it. Definitely is true. And the thing is, like, this kind of stuff, dies of starvation, that's just, I can't even imagine that kind of thing. I mean, these people, these elderly people, because what did you say the median age was again, Matt? 70 something?
78.
So almost 80 years old, right?
Yep.
People at the end of their lives, I mean, they're frail to begin with. And then, a lot of people say, when you just lose the will to live, then you just die. And so when you don't get visitors and you're just kind of kind of surviving, you're just existing, that's a one-way ticket to being dead.
Yep.
And it's really sad to hear, man.
It's incredibly sad. And the callousness of our society's response to this has been shocking to me in a lot of respects. I mean, it's not surprising, but it is shocking still. It's that we can say things, mantras like, oh, you're not going to wear a mask because you hate your grandma. But at the very same time, they're the same ones lobbying for the policies that is killing grandmas isolated in their homes, in their retirement homes. Which, honestly, let's be honest, if you're sending your family for someone else to take care of them until they die, there's some other issues there in the first place.
That's another issue. But Matt, what's so disgusting about it is that this is happening. It's an evil kind of just shows a total disregard for your grandparents or your elderly, and at the same time, it's being called loving. It's being called love. This is the thing about man's law. It inverts everything. So now the loving thing to do for your elderly, because they're the at-risk community, of course, as we're being told, the loving thing to do is to not visit them. You stay away from them. You make sure that the only way you see them is through glass or something like that, and that's love. That's twisted, man. That's twisted.
Yeah, so heartbreaking. And we know people that have had to watch their family members die, and in the convalescent, they weren't allowed to visit. There was no way they could get in to see them.
Yep.
That's the society we want to live in. Like, you want to stand back, like, your freedom from God is worth that to you. Like, this is the kind of place you want to be. I mean, I guess it is.
And we know it's a scam. And we know it's a scam because John Lewis dies and the stadium's packed.
Right.
For his death, for his funeral. So it's like, we know it's a scam. And Christians shouldn't fall for scams like that, man. We shouldn't do that. And the thing is, like, we don't fall for. I'm willing to bet that most real Christians out there that are complying with all this government stuff, that they're not doing it because they believe in it. They're doing it because their leaders told them that that's the Christian thing to do. Yeah. So I blame the leaders.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And again, it's our leadership as Christians has failed us for a long time. And I think for me personally, just saying this for me, I don't know if AD agrees with this or not. I think a big part of it is all of our leaders, for the most part, are disqualified, or a lot of them are disqualified. I should say it that way. They have kids that are going off into the world. They've rejected the faith, and yet they're still pastors. And we don't call them out, and we don't ask them to step down. And it's not to say like, oh, you're a bad Christian or you're terrible or that you're a sinner yourself, but you're disqualified. It's not anything about your status as a Christian. It's God has no longer called you to be in that position, and we need to get the person that God has called into that position. And the consequence of that is you don't have a solid foundation to fight and stand against the things you need to fight about because you're compromised and you're not standing on solid ground. And this is what happens. You can't fight yourself, and therefore you don't teach your flock how to fight.
Listen to this loving policy. So Dan Spratt says his wife, her grandmother, who is healthy and 95 years old, is currently locked in her room and is fined if she walks in the hallway after hours without permission. I'm assuming that's what that means. And they can't visit her, or she will be expelled from her place, which is where she wants to be. She wants to live in this, I guess it's like probably a retirement community or something like that.
Right.
She wants to live there. And if they visit her, she'll get expelled from her house, and she has to stay in her room, and she can't walk around. And like you said, that's the mercy of the wicked.
Mercy of the wicked. Yep. And
but Ed Stetzer supports it. So hey, your conscience is eased, Christian.
Yeah, don't worry. And the ERLC's had some really good constructive conversations with the government.
Very constructive. Right? Yeah, it's a constructive conversation. I'm sure it'll lead to basically the same place it led in LA with some kind of a legal order. Mm-hmm. Man, I wish I had the timeline of that. I bet you that letter. I bet you the cease and desist came out that day.
Dude, I bet that cease and desist letter was written pre-meeting, all ready to go out. Because those cease and desist letters take some time. They're not just like templated up and gone.
Right. He's very constructive meeting. Maybe he constructed the cease and desist.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, that's what he meant by constructive. The other way around. Oh man. But going back to this whole wearing the vaccine, like I'm not a vaccinated thing, it really is troubling to me because I can see it's progressive, easy steps to, oh, you have a religious exemption? Okay, you don't need to have it, but you still have to wear this badge. Like if they're doing it to your children, why wouldn't they do that to you in the public as well? If they're doing it to you in public schools, why wouldn't they do that to you in public spaces? And then it turns out because the Christians are the ones not taking the vaccine, their religious exemption, then the Christians start to get blamed. How many times in history have the Christians got blamed for things? Or in the case of the Germans in World War II, the Jews got blamed for everything. They weren't sent off to concentration camps at first. It was first with the star. Yeah. And then it was their businesses were taken away. And can't you see this very same logic for the health? Okay, first it's the stars. Don't hug them. And then, oh, now you can't patron their stores anymore because you're contaminated. Don't go to their churches. Now we need to move them somewhere else. Like, is this even a crazy notion anymore in 2020?
So your problem, Matt, is that you're trying to think a few steps ahead, but we're not allowed to do that. It's just all about right now.
Yeah. And so this is my question to you in all seriousness. Like the face mask thing is like, okay, if you don't see it, you don't see the battle, wear the face mask or whatever. But like in this case, I'm never putting that on. And when do we realize like, hey guys, this is too far because those steps that I just mentioned that could happen, that's too close. Like we need to start fighting back. It's more than just saying, I'm not going to do it. We shouldn't allow other people. Like there's going to be a point because all these things are going to be little battles that just push us farther and farther. I don't think we're ever going to see this big step where all of a sudden we're going to go from face masks to you're never allowed to leave your house again. It's going to be little steps. And when is that little step too far? We really need to start thinking about this, or we're going to just keep getting little steps all the way onto the train to the camp.
You're so right. So basically, let me see if I understand what you're asking. So I've kind of advocated for, I don't want to wear a mask. And primarily the reason I don't want to wear a mask is not so much the uncomfortability, which it is very uncomfortable, but because I don't want to send signals that I think this is legitimate. I don't want anyone to, every time someone sees my bare face out there, they're like, why isn't he scared like me? Like, what's going on here? And it sends a signal that not everybody is buying into this. Not everybody's just doing what they're told. And I think that's an important signal to send. But I think what you're asking, though, is when do we take it a step further and say, I'm not wearing one, and you shouldn't either because this is the road to become a slave. And let me explain to you the ways. Is that kind of what you're saying? Like in our churches especially, like no masks in here.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's face masks, and then it was goggles, and now it's these yellow stars or yellow circles or yellow shirts. So then what's after that? And then what's next? And so it's always it's always going to be the boiling pot scenario. So at what temperature do we realize, hey, this is the moment we have to fight back or it's over?
Right.
That's going to come.
I see what you're saying. No, I definitely see what you're saying. That's going to come. And I think it has to be, we have to be prepared to just get rid of it all. So, let's just say you decide that the yellow shirt with the, I don't know, let's just put a cross on there just to make it extra Nazi-like.
Yeah.
Yellow cross. You have to wear it if you're not vaccinating or whatever. At that point, we should say, no, we're not wearing it. And we're taking off the goggles and the mask and all that stuff too.
Yeah.
And we're not social distancing anymore. Like you just have to, you have to be willing to just rip it all off like a Band-Aid. It's got to be the guy. It's got to be the kid that says the emperor has no clothes. It's not like, it can't just be like, well, I don't really think his clothes are that great, knowing that he's naked. You know what I mean? Like everyone else around you is saying the clothes are great. And you're like, you see that he doesn't have any, but all you say is they're not that great. No, you have to actually be the one to just go all the way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think I see your point.
Totally agree with you.
We need to think about
I think
that.
that's the exact plan. That's the exact thing that we need to do is when we feel that point has been hit, it's all got to be thrown off. And it's like, I'm going to go to jail. I'm going to get fined, whatever it is, because it's going to be the boiling pot scenario. It's either you're going to be reprimanded or punished for the little thing, or we're going to get so far down the line that the pushback at all is going to be way too costly. It's going to be your life or something to that effect.
Daniel Pratt, but look what he said here. Let me let you finish, and then make sure we go back to him. I'll let you finish.
Okay. I was just going to say this. And for me, just to make tangible, like I don't want to be abstract. I want to be helpful and constructive. For me, I really believe that the mask is the last point where I'm not doing that. So to me, for me, I'm not wearing the mask. If people want to wear the mask, that's fine. I have like 6 reasons why I'm not wearing the mask. One, like what you said, the image, the optics of it, the stand that it makes, the differentiation from the world it makes, but also from a health perspective, those things are disgusting. They carry bacteria. They don't help. There's no evidence that it works. Like there's a plethora of things, of reasons why I don't do it.
Yeah.
The next step, whatever that is, goggles, stars, shirts, any of those things, I'm done with it all. And I'm telling everyone else to do it too. And I'm going to lead the charge, and whoever wants to follow me can do it, because it's going to be the boiling pot, guys. And we really need to start understanding the plays being run. It's not about a colored shirt. It's not about a white face mask. It's about where that's leading us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right, Daniel.
Daniel said this. So let me know what you think of this. By the way, before I say this, he told me that he actually did write it correctly. His grandmother-in-law got fined for walking, even though she had permission. An old Karen told on her. So she got fined for that. Anyway, here's what he says about what you just said, Matt, this whole argument. Mm-hmm. He says, it's the same thing with the pronouns, the same argument, like, using someone's personal pronoun. Mm-hmm. What do you make of that? Like, because he's talking about what you're saying right there about the masks and stuff like that.
So that is a great example of what I'm talking about, but it's different in one respect. So let's go back to the pronouns for a second. It didn't start with the pronouns and the gender fluidity and things like that. It started with civil unions for gay people. I think that's where it would start. It may have gone before that, but that's the first step I remember. Civil unions, then gay marriage, then you'll bake the cakes, then transgender, then transgenders will teach your kids, and then there's no gender whatsoever. Now, I might have missed some steps in there, but you see, those were all like blocks of time that we were fighting battles of the degeneration of our culture, that we were the progressives were pushing towards something. And now we're here where no one can say their name. Their Twitter handles have him, her on it, or whatever they want to put it. And there's this progression. But this is different to me, this battle, because that battle is let other people do it, acknowledge them, treat them that way. This is, we're going to make you do it. And you're doing the progression. They're making you go through this progression. And that's a big difference. It might be subtle, but it's a big difference to me.
Interesting. Same kind of thing, but slightly different, what you're saying.
It's the same play. It's a different battlefield. Before it was, hey, let other people do what they want. And then it became, hey, now you need to acknowledge it. Hey, you need to be okay with it. And things like that. Now it's, you need to do this. Okay, now you need to do this further, then this. Then you need to do this with your children. Then we're going to take your children, and then you can't see your grandparents and all of these different things. It's you will do what we say instead of you need to treat people a different way. And to me, that's a big difference.
Sean Glinsky has a question for you, Matt, or it's not a question. He just wants to let you know.
Okay.
You should be ready to be condemned by other Christians for not loving your neighbor. Are you ready for that, Matt?
I've been getting condemned for that since I've had a podcast.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I mean, love your neighbor might be the most abused idea maybe in Christianity, because anyone can just say that. I mean, I did a video where I gave 5. It was about an article that said 5 gospel reasons to wear a mask even though you hate it, and I did one about like 5, I don't know, gospel-centered reasons about not wearing a mask. So I could, of course, use the same rhetoric they do and loving your neighbor and stuff like that. But like, love your neighbor actually has content to it. You know what I mean? Like, you can't just throw that around. Like, you're not loving your neighbor by not wearing a mask. Like, what are you talking about? Like, remember when people were saying this is the cold? There's like a bad cold. We're getting ripped for that. Man, it turned out it's kind of
Nancy Pelosi is like, go back to the parade. We're gonna do the parade. It's just a bad cold.
And it's kind of what it is, though. Like, it's it's a little worse, but let's get real here.
Statistics are the same. You know the problem. The reason that happens.
I love it, man, because the statistics, man, they don't lie, and the more they come out, and that's even assuming that these statistics are real, which they're not necessarily. They're inflated. So even with the inflated statistics,
I know it's absolutely insane.
It's a bad cold.
The Cross Politic guys had a scientist on or something like that, and he said, and I kind of agree with this. I think it's a good point. You don't look at the cases, the death tolls based on symptoms because they're arbitrary. You can die from a car accident if you had COVID. They count it as a COVID death, right?
Right.
So what he's been doing is looking at total deaths, regardless of the reason of death. And there has been no change since COVID in the population.
That's a very good point that I can't believe I've never thought of that.
I know, me neither, the data guy.
Right. Like, why not just say, okay, how many people die? What's the rate of death just in a normal, March through whatever it is, September. And so if that's unchanged, which is what you're saying it is, then what are we even talking about here?
Exactly. I want to go back to, I know, it's insane, dude. And yet we're wearing badges and masks and goggles and all of this stuff too. But I want to go back to this because I think this is a really good point. The reason that love is being weaponized like this is because Christians treat love like the pagans treat gender. It's fluid. It's whatever you want it to be. There's no concrete definition of what it is. It's whatever you feel like, that's what it is. Christians are treating love like pagans treat gender. And therefore, you can say whatever you want. Oh, you're not being loving because you don't fit my standard of what love is. Oh, you said something harsh to someone. You told them they're in sin. That's not very loving. Didn't Jesus say to love your neighbor? Well, he did. We are to love our neighbors. But there's a specific definition of what love is, guys.
That's
just like there's two genders.
And we know this, from none other than the Democratic presidential candidate who decided that he had to pick a woman for his. Wouldn't you know it? He figured out how to pick an actual woman.
Yeah, that's amazing.
I'm not the bigot. It's Biden. You can't blame me for what Biden said.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
You probably sniffed your hair so bad the other night.
Was that one of the tests for VP? I have to love your smell.
Just smell your hair. She'd be obviously all about that. I mean,
whatever it takes. She's an opportunist, man. She's an opportunist.
Oh, man.
Right. Well, the last thing I want to end with, because I don't want to end with that, is I just want to say and encourage you guys with this. I have yet to see somebody who's relied on the Bible and been biblically based and rooted in the foundational truths of the gospel. I have yet to see someone like that be treated or it turned out for them to be foolish. I've yet to see them be made a fool from doing that. So if you're unsure about what's going on in life, get into the word, be praying, and stand on that foundation. So saying good night. Thank you for everyone who is listening and watching and interacting. We had a pretty good crowd today. I really appreciate it. If you feel so inclined and you want to support us, you can go on to patreon.com/reformgelical. You can see the recording of the show Fridays on YouTube and wherever you listen to podcasts. Until next time, you can see us next week, Thursday, 7:30 p.m. Eastern time.
Daniel Spratt is on fire right now. We got to end this show, but his comment,
what is that?
He's talking to me, I think, when I said about a woman, and he said, "Don't you mean an individual with a cervix?"